I'm Leila Monroe, 34 years old, and the creekside cabin my Uncle Frank left me was my sanctuary, my future, and my most cherished possession. Imagine the scent of rain on pine trees, the gentle rustle of leaves. That cabin was everything to me. But when I found out my guardians had secretly sold it to fund my sister Sophie's extravagant engagement party, something inside me shattered. Our family had always had a clear hierarchy, with Sophie at the top and me somewhere near the bottom. But this betrayal, it crossed a line I never thought possible. Before I dive deeper into my story, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear more about standing up to family betrayal, hit that like button and subscribe. Uncle Frank was the one person in my family who truly saw me. While my guardians were always wrapped up in Sophie's demands and dramatics, Frank took me kayaking, taught me how to fix things, and shared stories from his own upbringing. A self-made contractor, he built that cabin with his own two hands back in the 1970s. I spent every summer there from age 5 until I left for college. The cabin sat on 3 acres of pristine waterfront on Lake Winnipegossee in New Hampshire. It wasn't fancy by today's standards, a 3-bedroom rustic retreat with a massive stone fireplace, wooden beams, and windows that opened to breathtaking views of the water. The dock stretched 20 feet into the lake, where I spent countless hours with my feet dangling in the cool water, listening to the soft lapping of waves. The boathouse held Uncle Frank's old kayaking boat and the canoe he taught me to paddle when I was just 7. Every corner of that property was filled with memories that shaped my upbringing. When Uncle Frank passed away 6 years ago, everyone assumed the cabin would be divided among all the grandchildren or sold to split the proceeds. But in his will, he specifically left it to me. I can still remember the moment his attorney read those words. The weight of that legacy felt like a warm embrace, a promise of belonging. But now, with everything taken from me, I was left to fight for what was rightfully mine. Leila Monroe stood by the old creekside cabin window, her fingers tracing the dust on the sill. Memories flooded back, each whispering of a time when she felt cherished. But today, a storm brewed within. Betrayal lurked closer than she imagined. Just as she turned away, something caught her eye. A loose floorboard. Beneath it lay her Uncle Frank's faded journal. Her heart raced as she opened it. Inside were words written not only for her but also addressed to her sister, Sophie. The ink revealed a world of nostalgia and regret, painting Frank's doubts about the inheritance. Secrets that he kept out of love, not favoritism. Can you smell the rain in the air? The kind that sends a shiver down your spine, echoing the turmoil in her heart? When Uncle Frank passed, their family's dynamics shifted. The cabin, a symbol of her sanctuary, was now up in flames, betrayed by her own flesh and blood. How could Sophie's engagement party overshadow the legacy he left her? As she grappled with her emotions, Leila felt the weight of her family's expectations pressing down like a heavy cloak. A bittersweet blend of sadness and resolve washed over her. But why was Sophie favored? How could a mind so bright be overshadowed by selfish desires? The night of Frank's will reading, the disappointment in her guardian's eyes stung. The hurtful whispers echoed in her mind. You always were Frank Pearson's favorite. Was her success a mere accident? Did they truly believe she didn't deserve the inheritance? Each summer spent at the cabin carved her identity. She could practically hear the soft lapping of water, watch the sun glinting off the waves. Yet when she needed acknowledgement, all she received was an echo from the past. A torrent of emotion surged through her as she read Frank's words, filled with wisdom and empathy. Was it too late to reclaim the respect she craved? To stand up against the favoritism that had suffocated her for far too long? With each revelation, each heartfelt sentence, a fierce determination ignited within her. This was her chance to honor Uncle Frank's legacy, to reclaim her rightful place in the family. Would she finally find the respect she longed for? Or was the battle against her family's deep-rooted dynamics only beginning? The air was thick with tension at the dinner table, a hush falling over the room as Sophie Grant announced her engagement. Just as Leila Monroe poured herself another glass of wine, a stray comment from Frank Pearson's old friend shattered the moment. "Well, if Frank left everything to you two, how do you think he wanted it split?" The silence that followed was deafening. Leila's heart sank, memories flooding back of a conversation she had with Frank before he passed, one that Sophie Grant insisted never happened. "Can you feel the weight of betrayal?" The scent of rain lingered in the air, a reminder of the storm brewing within her family. Leila had always been the one to hold the family together, yet here she was, overshadowed by her sister, Sophie Grant. Sophie, the favored one, who bounced from job to job, never quite finding her footing. Their guardians had always supported her, subsidizing her rent and paying off her debts, while Leila fought for every scrap of recognition. When Sophie met James, a man from a wealthy family, it seemed like a fairy tale. But beneath the surface, both shared a reckless approach to money. As their engagement party approached, Sophie's dreams spiraled into extravagance. The guest list ballooned from 100 to 300, and the simple engagement party plans morphed into a lavish affair. Leila, genuinely happy for her sister, suggested the creekside cabin for the rehearsal dinner, but Sophie brushed her off, uncomfortable with anything less than perfection. As the engagement party planning unfolded, Leila noticed the stress etched on her guardians' faces. Her father, once proud of his business, became evasive when asked about work. Her mother's phone became a lifeline, a distraction from the financial strain looming over them. What was happening to their family? Why was Sophie's happiness prioritized over Leila's worth? The cabin, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battleground. With each passing day, Leila's resolve grew stronger. She would honor Frank's legacy, reclaim her place, and confront the favoritism that had stifled her for too long. Would she finally earn the respect she craved, or was this just the beginning of a deeper struggle? When I directly asked if they were concerned about engagement party costs, my father dismissed the question with forced cheerfulness. "Your sister only gets married once," he said. Though we all knew this was statistically unlikely given Sophie Grant's history of brief, intense relationships. We want her day to be perfect. I offered to contribute a few $1,000s toward the engagement party, though it would strain my own budget. My mother almost seemed ready to accept before my father interrupted. "That is very generous, Leila Monroe, but unnecessary. We have it under control." In retrospect, the signs were there. I simply failed to imagine how far my guardians would go to maintain the family dynamic that had defined our lives for decades. 6 months before the engagement party, the subtle hints that something was wrong became impossible to ignore. Sophie Grant's Instagram feed transformed into a showcase of extravagance. There was the reveal of her dress, which she mentioned had been handcrafted in France. There were sample photos from her chosen photographer, who I later learned charged $15,000 for an engagement party package. There were weekly updates about floral arrangements, custom invitations, and monogrammed everything. During a Sunday dinner at my guardian's house, I casually mentioned that I planned to spend a long weekend at the creekside cabin to do some maintenance and check on the property. "Oh, you do not need to bother with that," my mother said quickly. "Your father hired someone to look after things." This was news to me. Really, who I have been working with Ted Johnson for years. "Just someone new," my father replied, suddenly very interested in his mashed potatoes. Ted retired. That was strange, since I had spoken with Ted just 2 months earlier, and he had mentioned no plans to retire. I made a mental note to call him the next day. When I tried, his number went straight to voicemail. I tried again later in the week with the same result. I told myself he was probably just busy, but something felt wrong. The sunlight danced through the birch trees, casting flickering shadows across the water one quiet summer day at the creekside cabin. You could smell the pine and the distant barbecue mingling in the air, creating a perfect scene. Frank Pearson, my uncle, rested his weathered hand on my shoulder, teaching me how to skim stones. Laughter drifted from the porch, and in that moment, we were a family. We belonged. But now, that memory feels like an echo of loyalty, overshadowed by icy exclusion. Everything changed when my sister, Sophie Grant, turned our lives into a competitive reality show. She became the golden child, basking in parental favoritism. While I was struggling just to keep my head above water, her engagement party became a spectacle. A 3-week honeymoon to Bali, diamond bracelets, and extravagant gifts that made my head spin. How could my guardians filter out our shared history, replacing it with a shiny facade? I remember thinking, where's all this money coming from? Maybe James's family is contributing, I mused over coffee with my friend Sophia. But the truth struck when I saw James at a restaurant. "Leila Monroe," he exclaimed, pulling me into a hug. "Thank you for your generous donation to the engagement party." My stomach dropped. I had never contributed anything. The conversations at family dinners turned bizarre. Little by little, photos from the creekside cabin vanished from the walls. "Oh, we're just reframing them," my mother insisted. How was it that I was the last to know about the choices being made for our family? I was losing touch with my own history, and it felt like betrayal hung heavy in the air. Then came the call from Dorothy Matthews. "Leila Monroe, dear, about the sale. Will you be visiting the cabin soon?" Panic surged and my heart raced. Why was there a sale? Had my guardians decided to cut me out completely? I felt waves of confusion and disbelief. Who was I to them now? As the pressure mounted, I found myself slipping into a darker place. What was left of my sanctuary? My memories seemed to haunt me like ghosts. Would I ever reclaim my place in this family, or was I destined to be the outsider? In the face of betrayal, I'd have to muster every ounce of my resilience to confront my past and fight for my future. Could a once tight family be torn apart by ambition, or was it still possible to heal these wounds? "Dorothy, what sale are you talking about?" A long pause hung in the air. Oh my, I think I may have spoken out of turn. Perhaps you should talk to your guardians. I pressed for more, but Dorothy suddenly remembered an appointment and hung up. Confusion twisted in my gut. I dialed the Creekside Cabin landline, something I rarely did since I usually just showed up. The number was no longer in service. Panic surged as I checked my online banking. 3 failed attempts to access my primary savings account, all with the wrong password. The attempts came from an IP address I didn't recognize. At that moment, the pieces fell into place. Something was happening with the Creekside Cabin, and my guardians were hiding it from me. I decided to take a day off work and drive up to see the property for myself. The 3-hour drive from Hartford to Lake Winnipeg, AC gave me plenty of time to spiral into dark thoughts. Had my guardians rented out the Creekside Cabin to fund Sophie's engagement party? They had no legal right to do so. Or worse, had they borrowed against it? I tried to reassure myself. My name was on the deed. The property taxes came out of my account automatically. Uncle Frank's will had been crystal clear. Whatever was happening, I told myself, could be fixed. As I turned onto the familiar gravel road leading to the Creekside Cabin, the scent of rain mingled with pine filled the air. Fresh tire tracks carved deeper ruts than usual. The old wooden sign reading Whitaker's Rest, a symbol of my upbringing, was gone. My heart raced. Then I saw the moving truck. My first thought, bizarrely, was that someone was delivering furniture. Maybe my guardians had decided to surprise me with new pieces for the Creekside Cabin, though that would be wildly out of character. But as I pulled closer, dread washed over me. People were carrying things out of the house, not in. The crunch of gravel underfoot snapped me from my spiraling thoughts. The Creekside Cabin stood silent, but a stranger's SUV was parked out front, its engine ticking cool. I peered through rain-speckled glass. Inside, Sophie was hugging our guardians, radiant and triumphant. I wasn't invited in. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. No words, just a photo of Uncle Frank's old journal lying open on a desk I didn't recognize. The truth was suddenly outside my own experience, my sanctuary already claimed. Could I confront this betrayal? Would I ever reclaim my place in this family, or was I destined to be the outsider? In the face of this turmoil, I'd have to muster every ounce of my resilience to confront my past and fight for my future. Could a once tight family be torn apart by ambition, or was it still possible to heal these wounds? A middle-aged couple stood in the driveway, directing movers like they owned the place. The woman gestured towards the boathouse while the man checked off items on a clipboard, completely unfamiliar to me. Heart-pounding, I parked and approached them, desperation clawing at my throat. "Excuse me, what's going on here? This is private property." Her friendly smile felt like a stab. "Oh, hello. Are you from the neighborhood?" "No," I replied, voice steady but shaking inside. "This is my house. I'm Leila Monroe. This property belongs to me." They exchanged confused glances before the man stepped forward, extending his hand. "I'm Robert Peterson, and this is my wife, Linda. There must be some mistake. We purchased this property 3 weeks ago. We closed on it last Friday." My legs nearly buckled. "That's impossible. I didn't sell my house. This can't be happening." Robert's concern grew as he walked to his car and retrieved a folder. "Here are all the sale papers. We bought it from Thomas and Elizabeth Whitaker. Are they relatives?" My guardians. The realization hit hard. They sold my upbringing home without telling me. I flipped through the documents, each page revealing my guardian's signatures. Then I froze. Staring back at me was a signature that looked nothing like mine. "This is not my signature," I whispered, my heart racing. "I didn't sign these papers." The Petersons looked horrified, confusion washing over their faces. "We had no idea," Linda stammered. "The sale went through a realtor. Everything seemed legitimate. We've already sold our previous home." I fought to keep my composure, handing the papers back. "I need to speak with my attorney. This property was left to me by my uncle. My guardians had no right to sell it." I turned away, struggling to contain my tears as I stumbled back to my car. Was this a nightmare, or had I truly lost my sanctuary? It felt like my family had turned against me, taking everything I loved without a second thought. With my heart heavy, I realized I'd have to summon every ounce of strength I had left to fight for what was rightfully mine. Could I reclaim my life, or was I destined to be an outsider forever? I sat there sobbing uncontrollably, staring at the home that had been mine yesterday and now apparently belonged to strangers. Through the windshield, I could see the Petersons having an animated discussion, occasionally glancing my way with concerned expressions. After pulling myself together enough to drive, I headed straight to the county records office. The clerk was sympathetic as I explained the situation and helped me locate the relevant documents. Sure enough, there was a record of the sale dated 3 weeks earlier. The property had sold for $375,000, which I knew was at least $175,000 below market value. The sale had been rushed with the buyers paying cash. As I was leaving the records office, my phone rang. It was Dorothy Matthews. "Leila Monroe, I've been feeling terrible since our call. I think you should know what I overheard. I was at the general store about a month ago when your guardians came in. They were talking about using the Creekside cabin money for Sophie Grant's engagement party. Your father specifically said they needed to take care of it before you found out. I assumed you had eventually agreed to the sale. I'm so sorry." I thanked Dorothy for the information and asked her to email me a written statement of what she had heard, which she agreed to do. My next call was to my friend Stephanie, who worked as a real estate attorney. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, though my voice broke several times. They forged my signature, Steph. They sold my house to pay for Sophie Grant's engagement party. Jesus, Leila Monroe, that is not just unethical. That is criminal. Forgery, fraud, theft, you name it. Do you want me to meet you somewhere? You should not be alone right now. We arranged to meet at her office in Concord. On the drive there, I received a notification from my bank about another attempted access to my account. It was as if learning about the house had opened my eyes to a whole pattern of deception. Stephanie reviewed the documents I had obtained and confirmed my worst fears. Leila Monroe sat in the lawyer's office, her heart racing. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken truths. The lawyer's words echoed in her mind. "Do you want to pursue criminal charges against your guardians?" The thought sent a chill down her spine. 3 weeks until Sophie Grant's engagement party. Could she really keep quiet, or would everything unravel before the vows? And if she chose to speak up, who would stand by her when the truth spilled out? This was more than just a betrayal. It was a fight for her identity, her worth. Leila had always been the overlooked sister, the one who faded into the background while Sophie Grant basked in the spotlight. Now, with her upbringing home sold out from under her, she felt the weight of her family's choices pressing down like a storm cloud. The scent of rain lingered in the air, a reminder of the calm before the chaos. "Leila, your guardians had no right to sell the property," her friend Stephanie said, her voice steady yet urgent. "The forged signature is clear fraud." Leila's mind raced. Did she want her own guardians arrested? The answer was complicated. She wanted justice, yes, but not at the cost of their family ties. "I want to handle this carefully," she finally replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sophie Grant's engagement party is in 3 weeks. I can't blow this up before then." Stephanie raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched on her face. "You're letting them use your money for the engagement party after what they did?" Leila felt the internal struggle. Part of her wanted to expose the truth, to confront them now. But another part, the strategic part, urged caution. If she acted too soon, the focus would shift to saving the engagement party, not the betrayal. "Let's document everything," she said, determination creeping into her voice. "We'll prepare the legal paperwork, gather statements. Then, the day after the engagement party, we strike." As she drove home, her phone buzzed with texts from her mother and Sophie Grant, filled with excitement about the engagement party. The dissonance was staggering. They were moving on as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just committed a crime against her. Leila's resolve hardened. She would reclaim her sanctuary, her respect, and her place in the family. But at what cost? Would the truth bring her the recognition she craved, or would it tear them apart forever? The clock was ticking, and the stakes had never been higher. I did not respond to any of the messages, unsure I could maintain the facade of normally. That night, I barely slept, alternating between rage, grief, and disbelief. By morning, one thing was clear. I would get my lake house back, and my family would never be the same again. The engagement party was scheduled at the Langham, a 5-star hotel in Hartford. Sophie Grant had originally planned something more intimate at our Guardians Country Club, but as with everything else, her vision had expanded dramatically. I considered not attending, but that would raise questions I was not ready to answer yet. I arrived 20 minutes late, partly due to anxiety and partly as a small act of rebellion. The hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed with thousands of white orchids, crystal chandeliers, and ice sculptures. A string quartet played in one corner while uniformed staff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Sophie Grant spotted me immediately and rushed over resplendent in a beaded white gown that could easily have passed for an engagement party dress itself. Leila Monroe, finally. "I was worried you would not make it. Is not this amazing? Wait until you see the cake." I hugged her stiffly, searching her face for any sign of guilt or complicity. All I saw was her usual self-absorbed excitement. "It is certainly elaborate for an engagement party," I managed to say. Sophie Grant waved dismissively. "You only get engaged once." Well, to the right person anyway. She giggled as though her 2 previous broken engagements were charming quirks rather than concerning patterns. "Where are Mom and Dad?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Over by the champagne fountain." They are talking to the engagement party planner about adding fireworks to the reception. Can you believe it? Actual fireworks. I made my way across the room, stopping to greet family, friends, and relatives. Everyone was buzzing about the spectacular engagement party plans, with several people commenting on how generous my guardians were being. Leila Monroe's heart raced, a thunderous drum drowning out the laughter surrounding her. As she gripped her glass, a wave of nausea rose. Her guardian's careless words sliced through the air, her inheritance funding Sophie Grant's lavish engagement party. The sparkle of champagne, the laughter, the opulence of it all stood in stark contrast to her simmering despair. Was this how they truly saw her? An unseen ghost at her own family's gathering? Every ounce of courage whispered that she should step forward, but fear froze her. If she challenged them, would she lose even the fragments of love she clung to? The night had already unraveled her, ripping at the seams of her worth and purpose. She hadn't wanted to come, but the truth lingered in her chest, a burning reminder of what she stood to lose. The grand ballroom was a kingdom built on secrets. The bouquet of white orchids, the crystalline chandeliers, and the string quartet created a facade of joy, while Leila's heart felt like a stone in her chest. And there was her sister, Sophie, sparkling in a beaded gown that looked more like an engagement party dress. "Leila, I was worried you wouldn't show." Sophie's excitement dripped with insincerity. "Isn't everything just breathtaking? Wait till you see the cake." Leila forced a smile, but inside she felt like a stranger. "It's certainly something," she replied, her voice thin. As Sophie bragged about extravagant engagement party plans, Leila's stomach churned. She had no space in this dream world, only the bitter taste of betrayal and the stinging reminder that the dreams they celebrated were built on her sacrifices. The sweetness of champagne soured as she watched her guardians lavish Sophie with praise. "Sophie Grant deserves the best," her father had said, sealing her fate. And when Sophie raised her glass, calling for attention, the world tilted on its axis. "And a special thank you to my sister, Leila." The applause swelled like a tide, crashing down on her. She felt the weight of 100 eyes. "Thanks for the engagement party present," her father had shouted, laughter rippling through the crowd like acid. Leila's heart sank. She managed a strained smile and fled to the restroom, heart pounding, leaving behind a world that felt increasingly unrecognizable. Would she let the charade continue, or was it time to reclaim her story? I locked myself in a stall and tried to control my breathing, which had become rapid and shallow. They were publicly thanking me for a gift I never gave for money stolen through fraud and forgery. The audacity was breathtaking. After splashing cold water on my face, I returned to the party, determined to maintain my composure. I needed to continue gathering information, not create a scene. I circulated through the crowd, accepting congratulations for my generosity with non-committal smiles. My Aunt Patricia cornered me by the dessert table. "Leila Monroe, darling, such sad news about selling the Creekside cabin. I know how much it meant to you, but what a wonderful sister you are to make such a sacrifice for Sophie Grant's happiness." I nearly choked on my champagne. "What exactly did you hear about the Creekside cabin, Aunt Patricia?" "Just that you decided to sell it to help fund the engagement party. Your mother mentioned you were having second thoughts, but she assured me you came around to the idea. She said, 'You realized you were not using it enough to justify keeping it.'" Each word was another revelation of the narrative my guardians had constructed. They were not just thieves. They were actively working to control the story. As I made my way through the party, I saw evidence of the Creekside cabin money everywhere. The custom ice sculpture depicting Sophie Grant and James dancing had cost thousands. The party favors were monogrammed crystal champagne flutes. Even the restrooms had been stocked with designer toiletries and fresh flower arrangements. I finally encountered my guardians near the gift table. My mother embraced me warmly as if nothing was wrong. "Leila Monroe, you look beautiful tonight. That blue really brings out your eyes." Thanks, Mom. Quite a party. Only the best for your sister, my father said, putting his arm around my shoulders. We are so proud of you both, you know. Sophie Grant with her upcoming marriage and you with your successful business. I wondered if he realized the irony. Rain drummed on the roof, echoing in the darkness of the back seat. Leila Monroe's pulse raced as she waited for the call to connect. Her thumb trembled over the screen, a flicker of anxiety coursing through her. Shadows danced across the window. Her own reflection felt warped, uncertain. "Did you know?" she whispered, her voice raw with emotion. The breathless silence on the other end was deafening. Was anyone ever really on her side? Just the night before, amid laughter and clinking glasses, Leila found herself drowning in betrayal at Sophie Grant's engagement party. The audacity of her family took her breath away. They publicly thanked her for a gift she never offered, a facade built on money stolen through fraud. The scent of rain mixed with the heavy perfume in the air, choking her as she forced a smile. "What a wonderful sister you are to make such a sacrifice for Sophie Grant's happiness," her Aunt Patricia cooed, a dagger wrapped in delightful words. Leila's heart sank deeper. Did they think she was blind? "I met the new owners of the Creekside cabin," she replied coolly, watching for any tell in her guardian's expressions. The hastily exchanged glances between them spoke volumes. "The Petersons seem nice," she added with a brittle smile. "Oh, have you been up there recently?" her mother asked, the slight tremor in her voice betraying her. "Funny, I don't remember putting it on the market," Leila shot back, every beat of her heart pushing her closer to the edge of the truth. They were not just thieves. Her family was rewriting her narrative, fabricating a story where she was the villain, the one who didn't care. A laughter erupted from her mother. "Now's not the time for this discussion. We should focus on celebrating Sophie Grant." "Yes, of course." Leila took a deep breath, compressing her fury. "We'll talk later." Once she escaped into the Uber, her resolve crystallized. "They're gaslighting you," her friend Stephanie said as Leila spilled her heart over the phone. "Creating a narrative where you agreed to the sale? They're in deep, and they don't even realize it." The next morning, she met Stephanie in her office, a new fire igniting within her. "Your guardian sold the property for $375,000 on June 5th, Stephanie began, presenting the evidence as if it were a lifeline. "They forged your signature on the deed. It's all right here." Leila leaned in closer, her heart racing. This wasn't just about a cabin. This was her life, her worth. They had no idea what was coming. The battle for her legacy was just beginning. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply off. "Do these documents really not require notarization?" I asked, a twinge of dread creeping in. We had to dig deeper. Either they had found a rogue notary willing to overlook the forging, or, worse, they'd faked the notary's signature too. My fingers pressed to my temples, the tension building like a storm cloud. And what about the Petersons? They had innocently bought the Creekside cabin, yet they didn't hold clear title. A forged deed can't transfer ownership, no matter how nice they might seem, I managed, swallowing hard. The Petersons could sue my guardians for fraud, but this would spiral into a messy legal battle. For the next hour, Stephanie and I laid out our strategy. She planned to file an emergency injunction to halt all financial dealings related to the property. "And we need to report the forgery, but let's wait until after Sophie Grant's engagement party," she suggested. "We should talk to a criminal attorney, too." "The district attorney might take action no matter what you want," Stephanie warned, but we needed to prepare. That's when she introduced me to Martin Clean, a criminal defense attorney. Over lunch, he leaned back in his chair, taking in the chaos. "This is a classic case of fraud and forgery," he said. "The DA would likely pursue charges, and, with the evidence we had, conviction would be a certainty." The mere thought of my guardians facing jail time twisted my stomach. "Is there any way to sort this out without dragging them through the courts?" I asked, vulnerability crackling in the air. "Maybe," Martin replied slowly. "If they own up to their mistakes, return the stolen money and agree to restitution, there's a possibility the DA might be lenient. But that's a big if. Would my family ever admit their wrongdoing? The scent of pipe tobacco and sawdust hung in the air, wrapping around Leila Monroe like a warm embrace. She could almost feel her Uncle Frank Pearson's hand on her shoulder, the weight of his love pressing down on her as he handed her a chipped mug of cocoa on those chilly mornings at the creekside cabin. The distant call of loons echoed across the water, and the mist danced like memories in the early light. That sanctuary had been her safe haven, a place where she felt seen and cherished. But now, as she gathered documents that told a different story, the warmth of those memories felt like a cruel joke. Loss was more than just a line on a ledger. It was a gaping wound. Over the next week, Leila dove deep into the chaos. She meticulously compiled evidence of the betrayal that had shattered her world. Dorothy Matthews, a family friend, provided a written statement about a conversation she had overheard. Bank records revealed suspicious deposits into her guardian's account, and Stephanie, her fierce ally, tracked down the notary whose stamp had been forged. "She never notarized those papers," Stephanie confirmed, her voice steady. "She'll provide an affidavit." But the most damning evidence came from Sophie Grant, Leila's favored sibling, who had been living in a world of extravagance. Online posts revealed a $15,000 engagement party dress purchased on the same day her guardians withdrew that exact amount from their account. "This isn't just about money," Leila said, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's about what they've taken from me. My connection to Uncle Frank, my memories, my future plans for that cabin." In the midst of strategizing with Stephanie, Leila felt the weight of her family's betrayal. "How do I express this?" she asked, frustration bubbling to the surface. "How do I convey the depth of this hurt?" After days of drafting and redrafting, she finally found the words. "Mom and Dad," she wrote, "what you did was not just illegal. It was a profound betrayal of trust. The creekside cabin was my sanctuary, my future, my dreams. You took that from me without asking. You forged my name. You created a fiction where I had consented." As she sealed the letter, Leila felt a flicker of hope. This was her stand, her fight for recognition and respect. Would her family ever understand the depth of their betrayal? Would they ever acknowledge the pain they had caused? The battle for her legacy was just beginning, and she was ready to reclaim what was rightfully hers. "You spent all that money on one day of celebration for Sophie Grant, prioritizing her desires over my rightful inheritance. I'm pursuing every legal avenue to reclaim what's mine. The attached documents lay out the serious consequences of your actions. This could have been avoided with a simple conversation. Instead, you chose deception and theft. Sophie Grant's engagement party will go on as planned. I won't punish her by disrupting her day, though I have serious questions about her knowledge of this scheme. But once the engagement party is over, there will be a reckoning." As the engagement party approached, keeping up the charade became harder. Sophie Grant bombarded me with daily texts about engagement party updates. My mother called repeatedly about bridesmaid dress fittings and rehearsal dinner details. My father emailed, asking if I planned to give a toast at the reception. I responded to each with minimal engagement, pleading work commitments when I could. I attended the necessary pre-engagement party events, including the final dress fitting and the rehearsal dinner, maintaining a polite distance that several relatives noticed. "You seem distant, Leila Monroe. Is everything okay?" my uncle asked during the rehearsal dinner. "Just busy with work," I replied, forcing a smile I had perfected over the past weeks, tired from all the engagement party excitement. The night before the engagement party, sleep eluded me. I reviewed the plan one last time. Attend the engagement party. Maintain composure. Let Sophie Grant have her day. Then, the morning after, Stephanie would send the legal package to my guardians via courier, and I would forward my letter via email. The reckoning would begin. As I finally drifted off, I thought of Uncle Frank and what he would say about all this. I could almost hear his voice. "Stand your ground, Leila Monroe. Some things are worth fighting for." The engagement party day arrived with perfect weather, as if even nature conspired to give Sophie Grant her ideal day. Amid the laughter and clinking glasses, I caught a glint of something familiar. It was Uncle Frank's old pocket watch, nestled in Sophie Grant's clutch. He only ever entrusted that to those he believed deserved the family legacy. Did he willingly pass it on, or was it taken without anyone knowing? The realization stung, sharpening my resentment and confusion. How could they betray me like this? The air buzzed with joy, but for me, the world tilted. As I stood there, the scent of rain lingered in the air, and the rustle of leaves echoed my turmoil. Would my family ever understand the depth of their betrayal? Would they ever acknowledge the pain they had caused? The battle for my legacy was just beginning, and I was ready to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The late afternoon sun cast a golden hue over St. John's Episcopal Church as the guests mingled, laughing. The air buzzed with excitement, but for me, each joyful peal felt like a distant echo. I stood there, wearing the pale pink gown Sophie Grant had picked for me, feeling like a ghost at her engagement party. The photographer called us to the church steps, arranging bridesmaids like delicate china. In the center, Sophie Grant glowed in her extravagant French gown, the fabric swirling around her like an enchanting aura. With the attention on her, I cataloged the staggering costs in my mind. $15,000 for Sophie Grant's dress, $3,000 for the bridal glam squad. Each expense clawed at my heart, a reminder of what I'd lost, a memory of the creekside cabin now vanishing behind this grand facade. The ceremony unfolded with all the flourish of a fairy tale. A string quartet filled the air, and an opera singer's voice soared as Sophie Grant teared up perfectly on cue, her makeup untouched by emotions. My guardians glowed with pride from the front row, their satisfaction stark against the emptiness I felt inside. I moved through the day as if in a trance, dutifully holding Sophie Grant's bouquet and adjusting her train, a frozen smile stapled to my face. But inside, my heart was a storm, fueled by a cold determination to reclaim my history, my worth. Once the vows were exchanged, guests piled into vintage Rolls-Royces, whisked away to the Rosewood estate where every corner sparkled with grandeur. Twinkling lights, over-the-top floral arrangements, a lavish, raw bar. It was all a shimmering illusion. I mingled among the crowd, accepting congratulations and deftly avoiding the gaping question everyone seemed to have. What about the creekside cabin? Each inquiry felt like a knife twisting deeper. As the evening wore on, the laughter rang in my ears, but all I could focus on was that pocket watch I had seen earlier. Uncle Frank's legacy, now resting in Sophie Grant's grasp, should have been mine. As I glided through the crowd, the scent of rain and the soft rustle of leaves outside reminded me of all I had lost. With every second that passed, I could feel the tension building within me. Would I go on like this, forever in the shadows of my sister's glory? My heart raced. This could be the moment to confront my family's betrayal, a chance to finally claim what was rightfully mine. Champagne bubbles fizzed on Leila Monroe's tongue, masking the knot tightening in her chest. Orchids glowed under golden lights, but the laughter felt distant, like whispers lost in a tempest. Sophie Grant rose, cheeks flushed, glass in hand, eyes sparkling with triumph. She wobbled, glancing right at Leila, a mischievous smile curling on her lips. The room hushed. What was Sophie Grant about to reveal that nobody saw coming? Leila squirmed in her seat at the sprawling estate's grand ballroom. In that moment, thick with exhilarating tension, she had to steel herself. Dinner was served. Wagyu beef, butter-poached lobster, an opulent feast that felt like a slap in the face. A 10-piece band played, and professional dancers coaxed guests onto the floor. As her father raised his glass, proclaiming, "We have spared no expense." Leila's heart sank. How could they celebrate this extravagant charade while she felt invisible? Then there was Sophie Grant's maid of honor, sharing a heartfelt speech that sent a wave of applause crashing over Leila. But it was Sophie Grant's moment that shattered her resolve. "I know how much that creekside cabin meant to you," she declared, her voice thick with faux emotion. "The fact that you let it go for my special day means more than I can say." Applause erupted, showering Leila with the weight of expectation. All she could muster was a slight raise of her glass, a timid nod. As a chorus of laughter enveloped her, the scent of rain outside mingled with the sweet aroma of desserts, evoking memories of upbringing and the creekside cabin she once called home. Hours slipped by in a haze of music and swirling bodies, but Leila remained on the periphery, observing like an anthropologist in a foreign land. The first dance unfolded, punctuated by the glow in her guardian's eyes that was meant for Sophie Grant alone. As midnight approached, her guardians cornered her near the dessert table, their faces eager, but Leila's pulse raced with dread. Would they confront her about that pocket watch, Uncle Frank's legacy, that now hung grimly with Sophie Grant's name? The tension in her chest coiled tighter. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. But would she have the courage to fight for what was rightfully hers? "You cannot do this to us, to your sister. We need to talk." My father again. I did not respond to any of them. By noon, other family members began calling. Apparently, my guardians had started reaching out to relatives either for support or to try to manage the narrative. My phone buzzed constantly with messages expressing confusion, shock, and in some cases, outrage on my behalf. At 100 p.m., I received a call from an unknown international number. It was Sophie Grant calling from her honeymoon. "What the hell, Leila Monroe? Mom and Dad are completely freaking out. They said you were suing them on the day after my engagement party. How could you be so selfish? Did they tell you why I am suing them?" I asked calmly. "Something about the creekside cabin. They said you changed your mind about helping with the engagement party and now you are being vindictive." "Sophie Grant. They forged my signature and sold my house without my permission. They stole from me to pay for your engagement party. Did you know about this?" There was a long pause. "I knew they were using money from the creekside cabin sale," she finally said, her voice smaller. "But they told me you had agreed to it, that you were doing it as the engagement party gift. And you believed that I would give up my inheritance from Grandpa Frank Pearson for your one-day celebration. It is not just one day," she protested weakly. "It is my marriage, my future with James. Your marriage and future with James have nothing to do with stealing my property." I said, "If you knew nothing about the forgery, then my issue is not with you. But if you were complicit in any way, there will be consequences for that, too." Sophie Grant started crying. "You are ruining everything. We are going to have to come home early now." James is furious. "I'm sorry your honeymoon is being interrupted," I said, not feeling sorry at all. "But this is a situation of Mom and Dad's making, not mine." After hanging up, I turned off my phone. I needed space from the barrage of family drama. Leila Monroe stepped inside, the air thick with tension, like a storm brewing just out of sight. The kitchen was a familiar scene, yet it felt foreign, hostile. The scent of strong coffee mingled with the musty aroma of old wood, but no one offered a greeting. Her mother's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, while her father wore a stubborn expression, as if capitulating to an unseen force. And there was Sophie Grant, perfectly poised, her thumb flicking across her phone screen, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. Leila's heart raced as she caught sight of the thick envelope sliding across the table. For a breathless moment, time stood still. What secrets lay within? Who would dare to speak first? The absence of Uncle Frank loomed large, a reminder of the legacy at stake. Leila felt the weight of betrayal pressing down on her. Just yesterday, she had been blindsided by her family's deceit, her inheritance stolen to fund Sophie Grant's extravagant engagement party. The betrayal cut deep, leaving her questioning her worth in a family that had always favored her sister. As she stood there, the memories of summers spent at the creekside cabin flooded back. The laughter, the warmth, the sense of belonging. But now, all that felt like a distant dream. "Leila, we need to talk." Her father finally broke the silence, his voice shaky. "There's been a misunderstanding about the creekside cabin." "A misunderstanding?" Leila echoed, her voice steady but laced with disbelief. "You forged my signature. That's not a misunderstanding. That's fraud." The room fell silent, tension crackling like static. Sophie Grant's face paled, and James shifted uncomfortably behind her, his anger palpable. Uncle Steve and Aunt Patricia exchanged uneasy glances, caught in the crossfire of family loyalty and betrayal. "Leila, honey, we thought we had your implicit consent." Her father tried again, desperation creeping into his tone. "Implicit consent?" she shot back, her heart pounding. "You thought I would just give up my inheritance for a one-day celebration?" Sophie Grant's voice trembled as she interjected. "You're ruining everything. We had plans." Leila's resolve hardened. "Your plans don't justify stealing from me. If you knew about the forgery, there will be consequences." As the weight of her words hung in the air, Leila felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was her moment to reclaim her voice, to stand up for herself in a family that had always undervalued her. But would she have the courage to fight for her truth? The stakes were high, and the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Would she find the respect and recognition she so desperately sought, or would the betrayal run too deep? The envelope lay there, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. What would it reveal? And who would emerge as the true hero in this tangled web of family loyalty and betrayal? You sold property that did not belong to you. You took hundreds of thousands of dollars that were not yours to take. Which part of that was a misunderstanding? "We were going to pay you back," my mother said weakly. "With what money? When was there a plan? Or were you just hoping I would not find out until it was too late?" No one answered. I opened my laptop and connected it to their television. "Let me show you exactly what happened, so there is no more room for misunderstandings." Over the next 30 minutes, I presented the evidence Stephanie and I had compiled, the forged documents with my fake signature, bank records showing the transfer of funds directly correlating with engagement party expenses, timeline of events showing the deliberate deception. Statement from Dorothy Matthews about the conversation she overheard. Proof that the notary's signature and stamp had also been forged. When I finished, the room was deathly quiet. Sophie Grant was openly crying. James looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. My aunt and uncle appeared horrified. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" I asked my guardians. "Not just legally, but to our family, to our relationship. You stole from me. You violated my trust in the most fundamental way possible. For what? So Sophie Grant could have gold flakes on her engagement party cake." My father finally spoke, his voice subdued. "We made a terrible mistake. We got caught up in giving Sophie Grant the engagement party she wanted. We told ourselves we would figure out how to make it right with you later, by creating a false narrative where I had agreed to sell by gaslighting me and lying to the entire family." "We panicked," my mother admitted. "Once we started down this path, we did not know how to stop." Sophie Grant looked up her makeup, astray with tears. "I did not know they forged your signature, Leila Monroe. I swear they told me you had agreed to help with the engagement party by selling the creekside cabin. I thought it was incredibly generous, but not impossible. You have always been the responsible one, the one who makes sacrifices." The last sentence hung in the air, unintentionally revealing the family dynamic that had made this situation possible in the first place. I had always been expected to sacrifice for Sophie Grant. This was just the most extreme version of a pattern established long ago. "What happens now?" my father asked, looking at Stephanie. "That depends partly on Leila Monroe," she replied. "The legal process to unwind the fraudulent sale is already underway. The Petersons will need to be compensated for their troubles. There will be financial penalties and legal fees. As for criminal charges, that will be up to the district attorney, though Leila Monroe's wishes will carry significant weight. All eyes turned to me. "I want my house back," I said firmly. "I want every penny that was taken from me returned, plus interest and damages. I want a public acknowledgement of what you did and an apology to everyone you lied to about this, and I want you both to get counseling to understand why you thought this was acceptable." My guardians nodded mutely. "As for criminal charges," I continued, "I do not want to see you in jail, but that may not be entirely up to me. What you did was a crime, and there may be consequences beyond what I can control." Uncle Steve cleared his throat. "I had no idea any of this was happening." "Tom Elizabeth, what were you thinking? This is your daughter, your own child." "We always favored Sophie Grant," my mother said quietly. "We never meant to, but we did. She needed more, demanded more, and we responded to that. Leila Monroe was always so capable, so self-sufficient. We took her for granted." "That is not an excuse for theft," I said. "No, it is not." My father agreed. "Nothing excuses what we did. We betrayed you, Leila Monroe. We violated your trust, and we are so sorry." Their apology felt both genuine and wholly inadequate. The damage was done. Trust, once broken at such a fundamental level, could not be easily repaired. The sunset painted the creekside cabin in golden hues as Leila Monroe lingered on the porch, legal documents trembling in her hands. Sophie Grant's car sped away, its taillights slicing through the dusk. The emptiness felt louder than any shout. In that heavy silence, Stephanie broke the tension with a question that hung in the air like a storm cloud. "If the truth is out, what happens to us now?" Leila's heart raced, uncertainty gnawing at her. The answer was lost in the gathering dark. Leila had always been the responsible one, the one who made sacrifices. But now, the weight of betrayal from her family felt unbearable. Her guardians had favored Sophie Grant, their demanding daughter, while Leila's needs were overlooked. "We never meant to," her mother whispered, but those words felt hollow. The damage was done. Trust, once shattered, couldn't be easily repaired. "I want my house back," Leila declared, her voice steady. "I want every penny returned, plus interest and damages. I want a public acknowledgement of what you did and an apology to everyone you lied to." The room fell silent, all eyes on her. Her guardians nodded, remorse etched on their faces, but their apologies felt inadequate. As Leila and Stephanie left, a strange mix of vindication and sadness washed over her. She had stood up for herself, but at what cost? The family she had known was forever changed. Yet somehow she felt lighter, as if a burden had finally been lifted. The legal aftermath unfolded over the next 6 months. The court invalidated the sale of the creekside cabin, ruling that the forged documents couldn't transfer ownership. The Petersons, understandably upset, settled for a compensation package that covered their moving expenses and legal fees. Leila's guardians liquidated investments and took out a home equity loan to repay her the full value of the property, plus interest and damages. They narrowly avoided criminal charges, agreeing to community service and mandatory counseling. When the creekside cabin finally returned to her, it felt different, tainted by betrayal, yet still fundamentally hers. The first time she visited, she sat on the dock for hours, reconnecting with the space and processing everything that had happened. That summer, she poured her heart into restoring the cabin, both physically and spiritually. She replaced the locks, installed a security system, and updated the kitchen that had remained unchanged since Uncle Frank's time. But as she worked, a question lingered in her mind. Could she ever truly reclaim the sanctuary that had been stolen from her? Each improvement felt like reclaiming the space, making it mine again. My relationship with my family entered a new phase. Sophie Grant and I spoke infrequently. At first, our conversations awkward and strained. She had returned most of the engagement party gifts after learning the truth, though she and James remained married. Their honeymoon had been cut short, and the fairy tale beginning to their marriage had been irreparably tarnished. During one of our rare phone calls, Sophie Grant finally asked the question that had clearly been bothering her. Would you have helped with the engagement party if they had asked you directly? Would you have sold the creekside cabin voluntarily? I considered the question carefully. No, I said finally. The creekside cabin was never mine to give away for an engagement party. It was Grandpa Frank Pearson's legacy, his life's work. He entrusted it to me specifically because he knew I valued it for what it was, not what it could be converted into. I might have contributed some money to your engagement party, but the house was never an option. Sophie Grant was quiet for a moment. I think I always knew that she admitted. Maybe that is why I never questioned their story too deeply. It was easier to believe you had agreed than to face the truth. My guardians and I established a careful distance. We spoke monthly, met occasionally for brief meals, but the easy familiarity was gone. They continued with their counseling, gradually coming to terms with the damage they had caused and the patterns that had led to their actions. We always thought we were doing what was best for both of you, my mother said during one difficult conversation. Sophie Grant seemed to need more support, more attention, more resources. You were so capable, so independent. We told ourselves it balanced out somehow. It never balanced, I replied. You took my independence as permission to give everything to Sophie Grant. Being self-sufficient became a punishment. My father nodded slowly. We see that now. We failed you, Leila, not just with the creekside cabin but throughout your life. We took your strength for granted instead of nurturing it. These conversations were painful but necessary. They represented the first honest exchanges we had ever had about the family dynamic that shaped all our lives. 6 months after the engagement party, I held a small gathering at the restored cabin. I invited close friends who had supported me through the ordeal, along with a few extended family members who reached out with genuine concern. My guardians and Sophie weren't invited, a boundary that felt essential for my healing. As we sat around the fire pit that Uncle Frank had built with his own hands, watching the sunset over the water, my friend Sophia raised her glass. To Leila, who taught us all that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Tears welled in my eyes. For so long I had accepted the narrative that putting my own needs first was somehow wrong, that sacrifice was my designated role in the family. Breaking that pattern had been painful but essential. The cabin became my sanctuary in a new way. I began spending 1 weekend a month there, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. I established new traditions, new memories. I planted a garden that bloomed in spring, built a reading nook in the sunroom, and learned to sail on Uncle Frank's old boat that I had carefully restored. A year after the engagement party, Sophie and James welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Emma. The birth created an opportunity for cautious reconciliation. I visited them in the hospital, holding my tiny niece and feeling the complicated emotions of family bonds that persist despite deep wounds. I want her to know her Aunt Leila, Sophie said, watching me rock the baby. I want her to know the cabin and Uncle Frank's legacy. I want things to be different for her than they were for us. As dusk melted into night, the flicker of firelight painted everyone's faces in warm gold and trembling shadow. I listened quietly, the crackle of the flames echoing my heartbeat. Suddenly, Sophia's voice broke the moment. Leila, Frank Pearson never updated the will. He left the sanctuary for you. It was withheld. The conversation halted. Disbelief rippled through the circle. My world tipped, realization hitting like cold rain. My battle was never with Uncle Frank, but with those who concealed his final wishes. It was the closest thing to a genuine apology I had ever received from my sister, a quiet acknowledgement that the patterns needed to change for the next generation. 2 years after the engagement party, I invited my guardians to the creekside cabin for the first time since everything fell apart. Just an afternoon visit, but it felt monumental. As they walked through the renovated space, I could see the emotions flicker across their faces. My father ran his hand along the original woodwork, his voice barely above a whisper. "Frank Pearson would be proud of what you've done here. He always said you understood the value of this place in a way the rest of us never did." My mother paused by the framed photo of Uncle Frank I had placed prominently in the living room. "We lost sight of what matters," she said, her eyes glistening. "We got caught up in appearances, in Sophie Grant's demands, and our own insecurities as guardians. We forgot that some things are worth more than money can measure." Their visit wasn't a full reconciliation, nor was it complete forgiveness. It was an acknowledgement that healing is a process, not a single event. Some trust might eventually be rebuilt, but our relationship would never return to what it was before. Perhaps that was for the best. The most important lesson I learned through this ordeal was about boundaries. For years, I had let my family take advantage of my independence and resilience. I accepted less while Sophie Grant received more, convincing myself it didn't matter that I didn't need their support or approval. But in doing so, I had enabled the very dynamic that led to the theft of my inheritance. Standing up for myself wasn't just about reclaiming the cabin. It was about reclaiming my place in the family narrative. It was about saying clearly, I matter, my needs matter, my inheritance matters, my boundaries matter. 3 years after the engagement party, I stood on the dock at sunset, watching the light dance across the water. The air was thick with the scent of rain, and the leaves rustled softly in the breeze. I felt a sense of peace wash over me, knowing I was finally on the path to healing. The creekside cabin was finally mine, in every sense. I had fought for it, restored it, and filled it with new memories. Uncle Frank's legacy lived on, not just in the walls, but in the strength he always believed I had, even when I didn't see it in myself. As I wrap up this chapter, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to confront family members who crossed your boundaries? How did you handle it? What did you learn from that experience? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story struck a chord with you, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe for more tales about family dynamics and personal growth. Share this with someone who needs to know it's okay to protect what's rightfully theirs. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, sometimes the most important relationship we need to honor is the one with ourselves.